So managing through tough times, managing through crisis, using leadership and a disciplined approach. And we would like to understand this more from a project management perspective. So try to draw a parallel. So many of you would be working as managers, project managers, program managers, and all that. So uh, that's the opportunity, that's the context. So let me take you through the presentation here. So this is the outline here. So when we talk about tough times, so tough times, maybe we think of like a crisis also. So we will start with kind of understanding, defining what's a crisis or what we term as tough time. And then maybe we have a current scenario right now. So we quickly talk about the current scenario and we take that as a metaphor to kind of relate what we are doing, how are we facing, and how are we responding and all that. Then we talk about what is needed to deal with a crisis and where do we stand in our response. So this is more in the current crisis scenario. um, Finding a solution. So we need to find solutions. We can't afford to get stuck. So finding solution. Do we know how to find a solution? And what all we need to do as an individual and as a business. So maybe that's another line of thought. Common challenges during a crisis or a tough time. So crisis is not an ordinary kind of a scenario. Tough times are tough times. I mean, as the name suggests. So what are some of the common challenges we face? Managing challenges through leadership, actions at individual and at business level. So what all we need to do as an individual and what all we can do as a business. And finally, I think we will try to end this with a very positive note, come out as a winner from the crisis. So that's the outline. So let's start here. So whenever we talk about tough time or a crisis, so it's very important for us to understand the definition of a crisis. So a crisis is a time of intense difficulty and danger. It brings some kind of shock. So whenever we use the word crisis, so I think we immediately relate this with shock, a big surprise, a big disruption, and a huge potential loss. So that's what a crisis could mean. And a crisis can come at different levels. So a crisis we may be facing at an individual level, maybe at an organization level, maybe at the level of society, sometime at the national level also, and sometime at the global level also. So the crisis can happen at different levels. So now crisis, when we look into this definition and we have a feel, we don't like this word crisis. Nobody likes this word tough time. So it's all filled with shock initially and a lot of disruption and all that. And it's very difficult to kind of tide through. So how do we manage a crisis? How do we tide through a crisis? So again, if you see, how can we manage through a crisis or a tough time? So we are starting with a very high level understanding. So it's all about our human power. So it's all about our human abilities. I think that's the most important part. So the way we can tide through crisis and the way we tide through crisis, many of us would have gone through crisis, different kinds of crisis, different kinds of tough times. So we go through, manage a crisis with our inherent ability. So I'm again repeating, I think this is the most important part, with our inherent ability to navigate through the crisis. That's one. So one is like facing the crisis. So there is a present scenario. So it's like our survival instinct. So fight it. And then also kind of channelizing all our efforts to find solutions for recovery also. We would like to come out of the crisis also. That's what a crisis is all about. So it presents a shock and then maybe it brings huge disruption. So we not only have to face the present, we also have to think about the future. So managing a crisis, maybe we can sum it up like facing the crisis with our inherent ability in the present, and then by channelizing our efforts to find solutions for recovery with a strong character, solid discipline, determination, courage, calmness, and leadership. So now if you see this, I think it all sounds like a lot more of human abilities. And definitely that's the most important power that we need to use to tide through tough times and tide through crisis. But then we are also seeing that, hey, so we can still apply some kind of discipline also. So maybe that is where we can think in terms of So what all we can do, what all steps we can take. So quickly, I'll take you through the current scenario. So I'll not take a lot of time. All of us, we have been reading about it. So right now we are facing an unprecedented crisis. So the COVID-19 pandemic, it's a global crisis. And this is like one of the toughest times since existence. I mean, that's what we don't have a legacy, we don't have a precedence for this. And we see that millions of people are being getting infected with this virus, and hundreds of thousands of people have already died. And it doesn't seem like stopping at the moment. And the whole globe is kind of under the influence of this crisis. So almost every country is like facing this crisis. So extremely unparalleled, completely unprecedented. And almost 5 billion people across the world, they're all inside their homes. And maybe now slowly we have started coming out of our homes now. And this crisis, this pandemic has kind of caused a complete shutdown of our social activities and also of our business activities, bringing the whole world to a sudden grinding halt. So now this is the scenario. And what has it done? What this crisis has done, this pandemic has done, it has brought widespread economic havoc. So we all know this. Again, I'll not take a lot of time, but then still we will just read through. So all nations, all countries, developing as well as developed, so nobody is spared here, are hardest hit. All businesses, small, medium, large, have come to a grinding halt. Millions of jobs have been lost globally, and maybe more jobs are still going. Estimated loss of trillions of dollars of economic value. People are forced to live in complete social isolation. So, because that's the recommendation right now. Our businesses and our lives seem to have stopped. All our plans suddenly seem to have failed. So, this is how it looks like right now. Um, Further to this, this unprecedented crisis, which has got no ready solution as of now. So, we are all struggling. So, what more it is bringing? It is bringing serious threat to lives of people. It is also bringing serious threat to the livelihoods of people also. Now, this makes it a lot more complex, and we have never seen something like that. So maybe we face a crisis at an individual level, or maybe at a business level, or sometime there is a threat to life, sometime maybe there is a threat to livelihood, but then this is the one where maybe we have all mixed up. There's a very suffocating feeling. I think right now, I'm sure all of us, we have different levels of anxiety. So, a very suffocating feeling of uncertainty and anxiety in everyone's mind, be it an individual, be it a business, or be it a nation. So, even every country is struggling, and a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty. Things are changing every day, every minute, with no ready made, proven, and immediate solution. Humankind is struggling to navigate through this crisis. So now, just taking this as a metaphor, it's not that I give you solutions to all this crisis, but then I think it's, as I said, it's more of a little thought provoking. So how we can deal with this and what we can do, maybe at the list. So what is needed now? So we are in the middle of a crisis, and this crisis, again, we all can relate. Individuals are getting impacted, society is getting impacted, business is getting impacted, and nations getting impacted, and the whole globe is also impacted. So now people have to respond at different levels. All of us, we need to respond. So what is needed here is a lot of solutions. That's what we are now looking for. Solutions to save lives of affected people who are already affected with the virus, solutions to prevent new people from getting infected, to find vaccine to immunize the whole population on the earth, to fuel paused economic engines. So because we have come to a grinding halt, again, we need some solutions. So how we can restart the economy, how we can restart the lives of people so people can start to go out. To restart the stalled business activities, giving back the livelihoods to people, to bring out people from social isolation, and to make the world safe again. So maybe we can add many more things here. So we're looking for all these solutions here. And all these solutions we are looking at, as I already mentioned, at an individual level, at a business level, at the society level, at the national level, and at a global level also. Okay, now this is what we are looking for. So where do we stand in our response to all these challenges that we are facing right now? So the current response, or maybe we have taken very stringent preemptive and preventive measures because we are dealing with the crisis. So let's face it, let's try to minimize the impact. So here maybe we have taken all those measures like social distancing, social isolation, closing the businesses, maybe a complete lockdown for the time being, and all those kind of stuff. So which definitely are needed, and we should also kind of have given some result in terms of reducing the expansion of this threat. Current focus and priority is on saving people lives. Every nation, every organization, every society, every individual is adjusting to this reality. So this is our current response. We are still adjusting to this reality, working on finding potential recovery plans also. Now maybe we have we have been facing this for last 3 months. Now maybe at this time everybody has started looking for how do we recover from this, so what all we need to do so that we can again come back to a normal or maybe a new normal. I think that's what people are saying. But where do we stand here? But we are still far from any meaningful solution. So we are working hard, everybody is working hard trying to find solutions, but then still a long way to go. Okay, now let's see. So the ground reality. So how do we find a solution? So now the problem in hand is we need to find lot many solutions and different kinds of solutions. So solutions for the businesses, solutions for the disease, solutions for maybe the social impact. So we need all different kinds of solutions, but then we don't have ready solutions there. So do we know how to find a solution? I think this is a very tough scenario. We need to find solutions. So what is the ground reality? Okay, so this is a very different kind of a problem. It's very unprecedented. So it is completely new set of problems we are facing with no precedence of similar magnitude and complexity, facing one of the biggest dilemma ever, whether to save lives or to save livelihood. I think this dilemma is one of the biggest dilemma, and it is still there, it's still hanging, and we are just trying to kind of figure out what we should be doing. The entire science and economic community are equally perplexed. Nobody knows for sure what needs to be done. So we are all trying to find out. There is no known, easy, quick, and sure solution to this. The world is on a cliffhanger. Now, this is where we are, but a solution must be found sooner than the later. And as I said, everybody is kind of working hard and trying to find solution. So now this is a tough situation. This is a crisis situation. And this is an unprecedented crisis to make it worse. So maybe we can use this as a metaphor. So we can have all different kinds of crises with different kinds of impact. So now let's try to understand how do we go about facing the crisis? How do we go about approaching finding solution? It's not easy, but then at least what all we can do. I think that's the most important part. So what happens when we suddenly face an unknown crisis? Because when we talk about a crisis or a tough time, and if it comes very suddenly, I think the first thing that happens is we all get dumbfounded. I think that's a normal response of humans, and it could be the best of people. And still we can get into this kind of a state of being dumbfounded, awestruck, loss of direction, chaos, and maybe no response. So this is where we get stuck the moment we have this kind of scenario, and especially when we don't know how to deal with that. But then what we need to do? Okay, so the most important thing to start here is, so whenever we have a tough time uh, or maybe a crisis scenario, definitely it's a shock, huge negative impact we are talking about. So the very first thing that we should do is we should take total cognizance of the current crisis. So rather than losing our brains, rather than losing our ability to think, we should become aware. So I think that's much more important, and we should take complete cognizance of the crisis accepting the reality. This is very, very important part, and its impact, and taking full responsibility to navigate through the crisis. We don't have a choice. We have to navigate through. So when I'm saying this, I think it's extremely important that we accept the crisis, we accept the impact, understand the impact, and we take complete responsibility. Again, at different levels. So I'm not trying to give a solution, but then the important part is, are we ready to take responsibility? The moment we decide to take responsibility, that is where would start thinking creatively, and that is where we will kind of start finding solution. No easy solution, but at least the path would start opening up. And then taking a disciplined approach to finding the needed solutions. So the first point is very, very important. So unless we work on the first point, we will never be able to, it'll all be chaos. So taking a disciplined approach to finding the needed solutions, because we look for different kinds of solutions. Invoking the spirits of true leadership in all of us. So again, I'll not say that one leader, my country's leader, would be able to find solution, or my business leader would be able to find all the solutions. It's like all of us. So it's more of an us than an individual. Moving to a state of fight from a state of fright. So again, this I'm saying, and this is normally what happens. So in a crisis situation, we get into a state of fright, and it's very normal. It's the best of people, the strongest of people can, because it's shock, and the shock could be of different level. So there's always a chance that we get into a state of fright, but then we need to quickly move to a state of fight, and moving from reacting to responding. So this is again a very, very high level approach we are looking into. But here also, I think it's first the human spirit, and we need to take control of our thinking. Everybody needs to take control of their inner thinking. Hey, so I know that I'm in the middle of a crisis. We know that we are in the middle of a crisis. There's a big problem. We don't know the solution, but then let's find solution. Let's accept it, and let's take responsibility to find solution, and let's start to fight. And let's start fighting doesn't mean that, hey, so I have to go out and start fighting, but it's more of my mental readiness that I need to get into. So here, so how do we find solutions? I said we should take a disciplined approach. So now finding a solution, dealing with a crisis is like finding a solution to the crisis, to the problem, and different kinds of crisis. We're not talking specifically to find solution to COVID because it's so big. It's more about a thought process that we all need to adopt, and how it relates with project management knowledge. So now dealing with a crisis, because we need to find solution, we need to come out of this. So it is temporary. So maybe we can think of managing a crisis like managing a very, very critical project. So it's not an ordinary project, but it's a project. We can draw this parallel. Projects are, all of us, we know, if when we work in projects, so projects are all about finding new solutions in a temporary time period. So we are always constantly looking for new solution to new problem. So crisis is also a new situation, and we need to find solutions. So we should kind of take a project management approach here, developing urgent on-time actions for curbing the crisis, and preparing for the recovery solutions also for the post-crisis scenario. So maybe I think we are in the second stage right now, second point. Maybe I think we have all dealt with the first part, and how we can go about finding solution by adopting a disciplined approach. So whenever we talk about project management, if I'm trying to draw a parallel, so whether we read formal project management body of knowledge or not, but then a disciplined approach definitely is needed. So that helps. So what is the disciplined approach? Understanding the problem, assessing the impacts, what is the current impact, and what all could be the future impact. So it's not about that immediately what I'm losing, what all can happen in the future. So we need to assess those impacts, very, very important. And once we know the impacts, then developing possible solutions. So then we need to start to work on coming up with new solutions. And how we can come up with solutions? By collaborating. So again, it's not me alone. So during a crisis situation, asking for help, reaching out to people, working with people, again at an individual level or we are at a business level, collaboration, true collaboration would be extremely important. So that's where we get help, and that's where when we start working together, that's where we can find good solutions also. So we read all of this, but then I'm just trying to say that all this we need to do in the true spirit. You are in a shock, in a crisis. We are all in a shock, in a crisis, but then we need to come out of this and we need to start collaborating for finding solutions by bringing the right people, right experts, implementing the solutions, because we don't find solution immediately. So whatever we come up with, we have to keep implementing those solutions and we have to keep assessing the results. I think again, all of you would be working in project scenario, that is how we move in a project scenario also. We don't have a solution instantly, so we keep experimenting, keep implementing. So we need to keep doing that and keep monitoring the results also, evaluating what all we need to change, keep adapting, keep iterating to improve the solution. So this is more about the approach part of it. Now whether I tell this to you or not, I'm sure all of us we follow this kind of a approach. Sometime being aware that I'm following a systematic approach, sometime subconsciously we follow this approach, but then this is what we are supposed to be doing. How do we find solution? Again, by leadership. So already we discussed at the beginning, this is the most important part. So we need to have a disciplined approach also, systematic approach, keep finding out solutions, keep implementing, keep assessing, keep reevaluating, keep changing until we find the required solution. So being adaptive, being agile. But then leadership would be very, very important. So whether I'm dealing with an individual thing, so I have to invoke my individual leadership traits. Or if I'm responsible for a team, if I'm responsible for a business, or if somebody is responsible for the whole nation, so leadership would be very, very important. So what all we can do? They say that unprecedented problems need unprecedented solutions. So we may have to think very differently. We should be open to adapt, leading with agility, leading with patience, leading with calmness, leading with courage, and most importantly, leading with compassion, especially during a crisis or a tough time scenario. Now, a lot of people are getting impacted, so aligning interest of all stakeholders. So I think this is extremely important. So how best the leaders, and again, when I'm using the word leaders, all are leaders. So at individual level, so I can also be a leader at my level, and then we can have leaders at all different levels. So it will be extremely important to understand the interest of different stakeholders and align those interests, inculcating a very high sense of urgency. We are talking about a crisis, so we cannot afford to be complacent. We cannot afford to remain in a state of shock all the time. So bringing a very high sense of urgency, a very high sense of alertness, responsiveness, uh, and togetherness among all stakeholders. So extremely important, easier said than done, but then this is what we need to do. Empowering teams, because now when we are talking about finding solutions at different level, so now maybe I'll speak at a business level or maybe at a team level. Many of you would be responsible for a group of people. So when we are looking at finding solution, we discussed that we need to work with experts, we need to work with people, we need to engage experts. So we need to empower them also so that they can work freely, they can suggest things. So empowering teams for faster decision making and solutions. So making task force, all of us, we know that, but then we again need to do all of this. Enabling a sense of collective conviction. So during a time of crisis, I think collective work would be extremely important. And this is the role of a leader. So we need to use this also. So we are talking a lot more about the human abilities which we need to put in place. So collective conviction, collective courage, collective confidence. So we get a lot more power rather than thinking individually. Engaging all stakeholders with direct and clear communication. So communication also would be extremely important, especially if you're talking about at business level, at a bigger level. So where we are now talking about a crisis where a number of people are getting impacted. So communication will be extremely important. Strong focus on execution. So here, while we are working on finding solutions, we don't know what will work and what will not work, but we need to focus strongly on execution and keep improving. by taking an agile and by taking an adaptive approach. So this is an approach part of it, and this I'm sure we draw some parallel with our project management approach. Some of you who would be managing projects, so you definitely would be would be aware about it. So what should we do again at an individual level or at a business level? So already we have spoken. So dealing with the present, that's the most important part. So maybe we have already dealt with the present to a greater extent. So we have seen this pandemic and we have seen the impacts at all levels, individual level, business level also, at the nation level also. And maybe we are taking all preemptive measures. So that's the first part. Second part, which is the most important part, is preparing for the future also. So what does it mean? Why should we worry about future? Why not the present only? So present is there. We know there is a problem and we are trying to reduce the impact of the problem. But then it is extremely important to figure out how is it going to impact the future course of action. And in fact, we need to start to we need to start thinking more creatively now about the future. And they say that a crisis, while it is bad, while it is bringing a shock, but then they say that a crisis also brings a lot of opportunities. Now sometime maybe a lot of good things which we wanted to do, but then in good times we never bothered about experimenting and trying those good things because we were happy the way things were moving. But then maybe we are forced right now, so maybe we should start looking into future and what better things we can do. So that's what should be our approach. Assess how the current crisis can change the way we will. This is again very important at a business level, at an individual level. How is it going to change the way we conduct business? How is it going to change the way I do my job? How is it going to change my relevance in the marketplace? So managing our individual and social life, what are the changes we expect and what are the changes we are expecting in managing our business. And then once we understand some idea about how things would change, so we also need to invest because change means we may have to do things differently. And already we see that a lot of organizations, they've already started adapting very fast. Some have been very fast, some are still struggling, but then everybody's trying to find out newer ways of doing business, newer way of running their profession. So we also need to focus on investing on building new abilities. This is extremely important. Normally we get stuck in the present and we typically delay thinking about the future, but then maybe this is where we need to focus a lot more. So by developing new methods and ways of managing business, by developing new technical and management skill, whatever, depending on what kind of work and what kind of business and what kind of professional we are, identifying new product services for the future. So this again, we are talking about an approach. This is very important. So while we face the present, but then we also need to quickly take charge and we also need to start thinking about the future, preparing for the future. Now here, when we talk about crisis and whatever I just discussed, I mean, it's easy to talk about, but then extremely difficult to really practice it because crisis is a crisis. We are in a shock. So it'll be very important for us to understand some of the common challenges during a crisis. Maybe we have spoken, but then once again, we will take a look into this. So a crisis or the so-called tough times, when they come with huge negative impact, and nobody likes negative impact. So it brings along with this a lot of psychological and emotional challenges. So we all need to understand this. As an individual, I need to understand this. And if I'm a leader responsible for a business, responsible for a team, also I need to understand, hey, so my people also would be getting emotionally, psychologically impacted. So what are the challenges? During a crisis time, the maximum focus is only on the problem. So we get stuck on the problem, focusing only on the losses. So we start brooding and we develop a very strong sense of fear and hopelessness. I think this is very normal reaction that would happen, leading to brooding and inaction, wastage of precious time, losing the ability to think and to respond. And it is found that our original creative thinking abilities may go down up to 80 to 90% because of the shock of the crisis. This is scientifically proven. And it starts taking a toll on our physical and mental health. So these are some challenges I think we definitely find, and I'm sure we would have experienced some different kinds of crisis. And in the current crisis also, I know that some people, almost everybody is going through, I think, the struggle right now, and definitely the impacts are negative. There may be few businesses where maybe for them it's an opportunity also. uh, I mean, not in a bad sense, maybe they have found an opportunity. But then the normal, I think, challenges are, these are some of the challenges. So leadership actually has a much bigger role in addressing a crisis or a tough time. And leadership at an individual level, leadership at a business level, and leadership at all different levels. So we manage a crisis, and what we need to do is leading with emotional and spiritual intelligence. So they are using another term now, spiritual intelligence also. And maybe they, I think a lot of people are saying that, so the world would be a very different world now going forward. So people, I think we all as humans probably would start to think very differently, and there would be a lot more compassion, there would be a lot more different ways, different values in lives might come, which we have been reading, but then maybe that can come. So empowering people, engaging with people, that's how we can deal with the crisis. Leading with compassion, courage, conviction, bring a sense of hope. This is very important because people feel hopeless. We all feel hopeless. So this is where we need to change our thinking, and we need to give hope, confidence, and building a sense of collective ownership, collective responsibility, invoking the leadership qualities in every stakeholder, in everybody. So maybe if I'm thinking as an individual, I have a family to also support. So I can apply this at a family level also, using authority and clarity as needed. So in crisis time, while things are very fluid and we talk about compassion, but sometimes we need to use some authority also. So it's not about dictating. Sometimes I think it helps. So again, we can decide this judiciously. Managing again, so what other things we can do? Ensuring a strong focus on recovery efforts. So already we spoke about it. Stop wastage of time. So the leaders would have this responsibility, and as an individual also we have a responsibility. Immediately stop wastage of time and energy on unnecessary brooding, garnering collective efforts on building innovative solutions. So we need to now bring more people closer, build new skills and capability needed for future recovery, focus on preparedness for the future. So these are some of the leadership uh, abilities and leadership thinking that we need to bring in to handle or to manage through a crisis scenario. So the, I think already we have discussed. So once again, so one last point. So what would help here? So what is the minimum we should do? It is extremely important that we assess the impact. So we talk about the crisis, we think about the crisis, and we feel that, hey, it's like the sky is falling. But a lot of time, I think we need to come out of this sense that, hey, so sky is falling. And how we can come out of this? Only if we can properly assess the impact. Hey, so what is the impact if it is happening at an individual level, at a business level? If you can really quantify the impact, especially the monetary impact and the lives impact also, of course. So I mean, so the quantification of the impact would be the most important part. So once we quantify the impact, and generally we should see, hey, so what is the worst case impact, what is the best case impact, and what is the most likely impact. So all of us, we know, I think this is how we talk, because nobody knows exactly what would happen, but then estimating the impact. And once we quantify the impact, come up with the numbers, I think this brings a huge sense of calmness. Hey, so now I know the impact. Now I can start focusing on how I can manage this impact. So the very important thing would be assessing the impact. I think this, I can tell you from my experience, the moment, as long as we're not assessing the impact, we feel complete chaotic. But once we assess the impact and we know that, hey, so maybe I can deal with this, and it'll help us to prepare ourselves for dealing with this impact. So that is the benefit of assessing the impact. So we read about it, but then doing this definitely brings a lot of relief, and then it gives you a means to look into future. So now what can I do to deal with this impact? Preparing plans to minimize the impact. So now only once we know the impact, then only we can start to make plans how we can minimize the impact. And then preparing plans to recover and regain lost grounds. Investing in and building in new skills and capabilities, definitely this is what we all need to do. The sooner we start doing this, better prepared we will be, and even to touch newer heights. So it's not about that crisis is only bringing negative thing. And we have, if we go back in history, we see that crisis has also kind of brought huge new innovations and much better ways, and has brought in a lot of opportunities also. So this should be the approach maybe at a personal level, and to kind of guide through this. So here I'll say assessing the impact, monetary impact. At an individual level, we all think about the monetary impact. Definitely that's much more important. And a business level also the monetary impact, because again it's the economy, it's the commerce. I think that's something very, very important. Lives, of course, maybe that's a different thing in this scenario. So the countries, so they have looked into that aspect also in deciding the measures that they would like to take. So here, so I think we just spoke about how to deal with a tough time, a crisis and all that quickly, because it's a small webinar. So what came out here is we don't like crisis for sure. Nobody likes crisis, but then we don't invite crisis. It comes and it comes suddenly. Tough times come suddenly, and we need to face it. So we at least tried to have some understanding that, hey, so when a crisis comes, what happens and why we behave the way we behave, the initial response, and what we can do. So maybe we need to take complete responsibility of the situation, complete stock of the situation, and we need to assess the impacts and then start finding solutions. Take a disciplined approach. And of course, using all our human abilities. So that is much more important. So without the human abilities, we will not be even be able to take a disciplined approach. So somebody just tells me, hey, so you take this approach. So it's not that so simple. So even going through that path in a disciplined way, so that also requires a leadership. So when we use the word leadership skill, so it's all about human skill, our human abilities, and we are all filled with that. Absolutely, we are filled with that. So I would like to close the presentation with a very positive note here, because people say that in a crisis we can find opportunities also. So is it really true? We don't know unless somebody tells us. So I think one best way is if you can go back in history and look at some facts. Maybe that would give us little hope, little motivation. So I just thought I will kind of to list down some of the great things that which kind of uh, were born uh, in the middle of crisis. So you can see here, so some unicorns, some of the large organizations in the world, and they all got created out of crisis. So the Disney, we all know, Disney is a big company, entertainment company, was set up in the Great Depression of 1929 to bring smiles to everyone. So there was a depression, the Great Depression, everybody was worried, and now Disney found a new niche here. Hey, so how can we bring smile? And now we know what Disney is today. The General Electric, GE, is like one of the top 10 Fortune companies, so which was founded in 1892, again out of a depression. This is again not, I have not created all this data, so these are all reality. IBM, again, the biggest, one of the number one technology companies in the world, um, was launched in 1911, again out of a very tough time in the business scenario. HP was set up 1939, immediately after a big depression in 1938. So typically depression means everybody would be depressed, the economy would be depressed, but then these big companies, people were there who could think through, and they thought of starting these companies, and these companies have grown big. Hayat, I think one of the largest owner and one of the best hotel chains in the world, again came into existence during a depression. FedEx again started in a depression. Microsoft again started 1975 when there was a huge oil crisis. So I just thought I'll share this. So maybe we can find a lot many more data. And the reason I'm just putting this here, it's not a ready solution to all the problem that we would be facing in a crisis. But then when we kind of uh, look into these positive facts, definitely I think um, they have those abilities to kind of spark some inspiration, some positiveness in all our minds. And then we can start looking into future with a lot more faith and a lot more positivity. And of course, there is a problem and we need to face the problem. There would be a lot of uncomfort that would be there, but at least now we have some hope and we prepare ourselves much better to go through this uncomfort situation and then try to touch maybe completely new heights which we never even thought about. So we don't know what future holds for us. So it's important that we should be able to start to think about the future. So some last thoughts here moving forward. So they say again, it's not my quotation, tough times never last, but tough people do. And I think we have been reading about this so very often. But then I think all of us, we are coming out of this crisis right now. I mean, whether we are aware or not, all of us, we are coming out, and I'm sure all of us, we will come out much better as a winner. Maybe a little struggling time, maybe a little friction, but then, yeah, so from friction, they say that I think we come out much more better polished and maybe much better ways. So it's time to sharpen your X, they say. So it's like again building skills and all extremely important. This is the right time, and I see a lot many people taking advantage. So I'm also a trainer and instructor, although and a consultant. So I see that people are taking this time and they're saying, hey, so this is the time. I never got time out of my busy work, and then they are like getting into learning a lot of new things, taking certifications and all that. So this is important. So this will help us to prepare much better for the future. Commit, let's commit ourselves, let's fight, let's succeed.